Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. Today we're going to hear evidence from some additional members, employees of the TMO. So, Mr. Gadd, who's our first witness?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the panel. Can I call Siobhan Rumble?
Good, thank you. Good morning, Ms. Rumble. I understand you're going to take the oath, is that right?
Yes.
Would you take the testament in your right hand, please, then, and read the words on the screen?
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Sit down and make yourself comfortable. Right. Yes, Mr. Gadd.
Good morning, Ms. Rumble. Can I start by thanking you very much for attending at this public inquiry to give your evidence? We're very grateful to you. If you have any difficulty understanding any of the questions I'm going to ask you, please say, and I'll ask them again or put them in a different way. If you feel you need a break at any time, please let us know. We'll aim to break once in the morning at least, but if you need a break at any other point, just signal and we'll aim to break then. The other thing I'd ask you to do is to please try to keep your voice up so that the transcriber, who's sitting to your right, can hear you very clearly and get down your evidence. It also helps not to nod or shake in response to any questions, but to say audibly yes or no. You've made 3 statements to the inquiry. Can I please take you to them? They're in a folder on your desk and they will appear on the screen. The first statement is dated the 8th of February 2019. There's a signature on page 15. Is that your signature?
Yes.
And did you sign that statement on the 8th of February 2019?
Yes.
I'm going to call that your first statement. Can we go to the next statement, TMO 1005-0001? And that's a statement dated the 31st of August 2019. Can we go to page 4, please? Again, do you recognise that signature?
Yes.
Is it yours?
Yes.
And did you sign that on the 31st of August 2019? Yes. I'm going to call this your second witness statement. And can we then go to TMO 00870943? Should be a statement dated the 12th of May 2020. Signature on page 5. Again, is that your signature?
Yes.
And you signed that on the 12th of May 2020?
Yes.
Have you read those statements recently?
Yes.
And can you confirm that the contents are true?
They are, but there's an error I noticed. I started in November 11, not 12, as my statement says.
That's very helpful. Aside from that, are the contents true?
Yes.
Have you discussed your statements or your evidence with anyone else in advance of coming here today?
About a year ago, I did, because I wanted to clarify the spreadsheet, because that kept coming back in the witness statement, and I couldn't remember, and I needed to remember. So I did ask my colleague at the TMO, which just clarified for me.
We may come on to that spreadsheet.
That's
in due
fine,
course,
yeah.
So you can inform us of your knowledge
Yep.
at that point. As you say in your witness statement, you referred to starting in November 2012, but we now know then it's November 2011. Thank you. I'm going to ask you some questions about your background and training. You set out at paragraph 6 of your first witness statement. You can pull that up. You see paragraph 6 that you began your career at the London Borough of Southwark, and then you moved to Sanctuary Housing Association, and over the page, Hyde Housing and Crawley Borough Council. Now, in those roles, did you ever come across personal emergency evacuation plans or PEEPs?
No.
In any role at all? So you were at Southwark. Did you hear of
Never.
PEEPs at Southwark? Never.
Never.
Okay. Did you receive any training in any of those roles in relation to fire safety?
I'm sure I would have done, but I can't remember any specific training.
Can you remember any general topics that you would have covered in that training?
In regards to fire safety?
Mm-hmm.
Not really.
Would you have carried out any training with respect to residents, fire safety and general needs housing?
Not really, no.
Joined the TMO in 2011 and your title was Area Housing Manager for Lancaster West. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you recall who interviewed you for that role?
Alistair Manson, and it was the board. So Bob, I can't remember his surname now, but Bob was the chair of the board.
That's
and
the
I
TMO board?
Yes. No, the EMB board.
The EMB board?
Yeah, I think it was just Alistair and Bob.
Right. Did you know either of those two before you?
No, I didn't, no.
The interview? Did you have any formal qualifications that were relevant to that role at TMO?
It was, I mean, my experience. I'd done the HNC in housing, went to college for 4 years, but if I'm honest, I don't remember too much about those 4 years. But a lot of it is practical, on-the-job learning. You learn through experience.
Just for clarity's sake,
Sorry.
when was it that you were at college prior to? How long was it before TMO that you were at college?
So I started my career in 91. I think maybe 97.
So 15 years?
Yeah.
Something like that. Did you have any experience when you joined TMO, recent experience of resident engagement and communications?
Well, yeah, because you're always getting involved, whatever's going on the estate, wherever you work, there's always communications and resident engagement. And previously where I worked with had a youth worker, so you'd always be engaging with the residents on some level.
As part of the application process, either as part of your written application for the role or during the interview, were you asked about fire safety training that you'd undertaken?
No.
Never
it
asked?
wouldn't be part of, I've never been asked that in any interview that I've had, no.
Whether at TMO or prior to
No.
that? Were you asked at any stage during the application process about interaction or experience with dealing with vulnerable residents, or what might be termed vulnerable residents?
I couldn't tell you what the questions were, if I'm honest.
Can we focus then on your role as area housing manager and some of the detail of that role? Now, again, turning to your first witness statement, you say at paragraph 8 that you're based at Lancaster West Housing Estate. You see that, paragraph 8?
Yep.
And at paragraph 9, your responsibilities included the day-to-day running of the estate and ensuring that antisocial behaviour was addressed.
Yep.
Can you help us with, in terms of seniority, were you the most senior person working for the TMO based at the Lancaster West Estate?
Yes.
Would you have been the main point of contact between the goings-on in the Lancaster West Estate and the TMO?
Yes.
Was it your role to ensure that any health and safety checks that were carried out on the estate were carried out properly, correctly?
In regards to these estate inspections, yes, because those were responsible to me.
Well, we'll come on to those in a moment. If any health and safety issues arose on the estate, or you were made aware of them, would it have been you that was responsible for liaising with the TMO health and safety team?
No.
Who would have been responsible?
The caretakers, the estate services officers would do their inspections, and they would ring through to the repairs and raise those repairs. And it was only if things weren't being done, they would come to me, and then I would escalate it.
As well as being the area housing manager for Lancaster West, you were also, as I understand your statement, in charge of the income team across the TMO.
Correct.
That's across all housing stock?
Yes.
And the entire borough?
Yes.
What did that role involve?
Making sure people paid their rent, getting people the help and support they needed to pay their rent, and if they didn't, then escalating it to the courts to get orders to make sure they paid their rent.
Can you help us with the amount of time that you spent in working in that role as income team leader compared to your role as area manager for Lancaster West? Could you help us with a division of labour?
I mean, most of my time, I was always at Lancaster West, so that is where I worked, and all my work was around Lancaster West and dealing with antisocial behaviour of youths. I'd be out and about. I wasn't a manager that just sat in the office, so I would be out and about and get my hands dirty. That's just how we were down there. We all worked together.
Did you feel that your role as income team leader impinged in any way on your ability to carry out your role on Lancaster?
Not at all, no.
Can we look at training that you did with the TMO? And you talk about this in your second witness statement. If we could please pull that up, paragraph 3, TMO 1005-0001. Paragraph 3, you say in that, I don't know if you just want to refresh your memory, that you don't recall receiving any health and safety training while at the TMO. Just to restate that then, is your recollection that you don't recall any training in the 4 years that you're at TMO?
I don't. To be honest, I can just about remember like last week. But even where I currently work, if I know I've done a load of training, but if someone asked me, what training have you done? I'd have to really sit and think, what training have I done? Even though I know I've done a lot. So I'm not saying I didn't have any, but I really can't remember what training I had.
Does that apply to fire safety training specifically as well? You may have had it, but you can't recall.
I really don't know. I can't remember.
Can I ask you whether you recall having any training on the TMO's fire safety strategy?
That definitely no.
The TMO's health and safety policy?
I can't remember, no.
Can't remember. Can you recall ever requesting training on either of those things or on fire safety or health and safety?
No, I remember, I can't remember for what reason, but I know I asked for some refresher training for the estate services officers, Paul and Rob. And I think that might have been when we had the issue with the fire extinguisher. And I think there was some refresher training. I do kind of semi-recall that, but not for myself, no.
You didn't go on that training?
No.
Or any training? Can we look at your first witness statement again, paragraph 29, the reference, please operators, yes, thank you. You say that before the refurbishment you were aware that Grenfell Tower had fire alarms, fire extinguishers, a ventilation system, communal fire doors, lifts and emergency lighting.
Yep.
You're also aware that there's a fire brigade drop key which could be used by the ESAs or the fire brigade to open the lift doors.
Yes.
When you were recruited by the TMO, were you given any specific briefing on these various fire safety measures?
No.
Did you know anything about them other than the fact of their existence?
Just that they exist. And the guys had worked there a long time, so they knew the estate very well.
The fire brigade drop key, who told you about that? Who informed you about it?
I think just Paul and Rob when they'd done their checks.
Were you told what it was for, how it was to be used, who it was for?
Not in any detail, no. But I think it was to check that it was working.
Right. And is that something you gleaned, or did someone come specifically tell you that this is what it's for?
I don't remember anyone coming to specifically tell me that.
You mentioned previously about the checklists and the estate services assistants. Is that the correct name for them?
Yes, ESAs.
Now I'm going to ask you some questions about ESAs. Part of your role involved supervising them. Is that correct?
Yes.
So Paul Stedman and Robert Regan.
Yes.
Yeah. Can I ask you first about your supervising role in relation to the inspections? Do you recall the ESAs being trained to conduct the inspections that they carried out at any stage?
They may have done. They was already in post when I came to the role.
So you're not aware if they were trained prior to that or not? Is that
No.
fair? And you wouldn't then have been involved in any training for them?
Not that I'm aware.
Do you recall whether they were given any written guidance about those checks and inspections?
They had a check sheet to follow, so anyone could really come in and follow that check sheet. It wasn't kind of rocket science.
You don't remember any guidance documents about what you should look for in those checks?
No.
Specifically dealing with fire extinguishers, do you recall whether there was any guidance for checking those?
No, I don't.
or any training or guidance in relation to fire alarm testing fire alarm systems?
No, it was just making sure they worked. And I think the fire extinguishers were part of the RGE contract, if I remember rightly.
And what was the consequence of that?
But they were I think they were the electrical engineers.
Yeah.
They used to be based in the office where we then got put.
And that's on Lancaster West?
Yes.
Right. Can we go back to your first witness statement, paragraph 38, please, operator? You provide there some examples of what was included on the inspection sheets used by ESAs. If you look at example E, you refer to the communal fire doors and chute room.
Mm-hmm.
Can we then go to your second witness statement at paragraph 9? Thank you. I wonder if we could zoom in. Yes, thank you. Just have a quick look at that. Yes.
Yes.
So the second sentence, the estate service assistants would inspect the communal doors. Do you know or do you recall whether the ESAs were trained in how to check whether the fire doors were functioning correctly in any way?
Not specifically, but I'm sure they had training. The reason I say that is because I knew that they would tell me, because sometimes the fire door closer was either not going back quick enough, it was too stiff or too loose. How would you know that if you hadn't had any training?
The example you give in your witness statement is too slow, and you've also then given us a couple of other issues that arose. Were those issues being too slow, too stiff? Did they arise frequently on Lancaster West, as far as you can?
I think sometimes they did, yes.
Can you give us an idea of how often?
Not really. It's hard to say, but I know that when they'd done the block inspections, that's one thing I do remember. Not a lot do remember coming out of the block inspections, but I do know about those communal doors, and they had to raise several repairs.
You say if they observed an issue with the flat entrance door, they would report it. Who would they report it to?
To the repairs desk at the hub.
To the repairs desk at the hub?
Yep.
Who staffed that repairs desk?
I can't remember who staffed it. It had a team of people down at the hub who managed.
Were they
desk.
TMO employees?
Yes, they were.
Or an external organisation?
Yeah.
TMO?
Yes.
Having raised that as an issue, do you know if they ever followed it up?
Well, it was part of their job to follow it up. So when they would do their next inspections, they would be checking that the stuff they raised previously had been actioned. And that's where sometimes I might get involved if weeks had gone past and something wasn't resolved.
You would get involved how?
To then contact whoever at the hub to say that there's a repair's been ordered, it's been several weeks, why hasn't it been done? Because the estate inspectors knew that they had to follow up. You don't just raise the repair and then walk away from it. You then have to follow up to make sure it's done.
May I summarise my understanding?
Yeah.
The check is made. Let's say the self-closer is too slow. Repair is requested through the repair's desk.
Mm-hmm.
The estate inspector then checks again a couple of weeks later. If it hasn't been done, they then raise it with you. You then contact the repair centre.
Yeah, not exactly. It might be they might have gone back to repairs desk again, or they then might come to me, or they might come to me the second time, third time. You know, because they're going back to check, and if something's not done, then.
And if you hadn't had any success with getting it repaired, either quickly or at all, what would you do? Who would you raise that with?
I mean, I know I could have gone to Janice Ray, being the health and safety officer, but I don't think we ever did, because I think once you chase something up, it gets, however it's stuck in the system or whatever, it would end up getting done.
Can I just ask, do you know whether there's any time within which ESAs had to go back and check whether a repair had actually been done?
No, they were doing weekly inspections anyway, because where we were situated, we was literally in the heart of the estate. Yeah. So they was always out and about and in and out of the blocks all the time.
So they would check up as and when it was
Yeah,
convenient.
but they would do their regular inspection weekly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on a slightly different topic, in terms of flat doors, so the flat door entrance and closes on it, was there ever any discussion, as far as you can recall, for a routine inspection of flat doors, flat entrance doors?
No, they never formed part of the ESA's inspections, front entrance doors.
Do you recall it ever being discussed, not with the ESAs, but say higher up the TMO or with Janice Ray?
No.
Can we go back to your second witness statement at paragraph 10? Thank you. And again, if we can zoom in on paragraph 10, thank you. Just have a quick read of paragraph 10, please. What you say there is you can't recall. Now, would it be the case that if they had been carrying those checks out, would you have known about them? Would you have known that they were carrying those checks out?
Yes, I remember the ones for the finger blocks, more specifically, because they often got stuck open. So we had some issues trying to get them ones closed, but
Right.
I can't remember Grenfell.
Can I just ask you to pause there?
Sorry.
What was stuck open in the finger blocks?
The vents, if a smoke alarm goes off, it's almost like a conservatory roof, and it just opens.
That was in the finger blocks?
I remember the finger blocks one, but I can't recall the Grenfell one.
Right. Can we look at a document, the year end for which is MET 000-65673? If you could pull that up on the screen, please, operator. Could you just have a look at that document?
Yep.
Thank you. Now, you may have picked up from the Metropolitan Police Service tag in that, but it's a document provided by Paul Stedman to the police labelled Picture Diagrams with Explanations of the Checks I Did. It's dated 16th November 2016. So that obviously postdates your
Yes.
employment at TMO. Do you remember seeing either that document or something similar to it in your time at TMO?
No, not at all.
Anything even remotely similar to it, or
No.
nothing at all?
No, sorry.
Now, I'm going to come on to the checklists that you touched upon earlier. So again, you mentioned a correction, or that you discussed these with someone else, but when we're going through these questions, if you just tell again the inquiry anything that you think they ought to know. Would you accompany ESAs in any inspections to ensure that they're being conducted appropriately?
No.
Never?
No.
Would you have known if they were being conducted appropriately or not?
Well, yes, because I had to fill out a sheet, and they would come back and it'd be in a folder before they got the PDAs. So I could inspect them anytime I wanted. But like I say, we was in the middle of the estate, and I could see Paul leave to go to Grenfell, or I could see Robert leave to go and do the other blocks. So I didn't have any concerns that they weren't doing their block inspections.
You trusted that they were doing it?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Do you recall if Paul Stedman or Rob Regan ever raised a concern with you that they were overloaded with work, they had too much to do, they didn't have time to conduct their checks?
No, I think that came a bit later on, not long before I left. I think where some caretakers had left in the north and south of the borough, they was asked to take on extra work, I think. But not generally just when we was at Lancaster West when they had their own blocks.
Right, can you help us with the time that occurred, that issue with covering other blocks?
I mean, it must have been maybe the last year I was there, so 15.
So 2015 into
14,
2016?
15 maybe, yeah.
And the issue was they were effectively asked to cover other blocks, was it?
Yeah, I'm sure, I mean, again, I couldn't say 100%, but I know that when people were leaving, they were asked to go and cover other blocks.
Right. In terms of their inspections in each estate, was there any time limit set for how long they had to conduct them?
No.
Were they given, do you recall if they were given, say, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes? None at all?
Not from when they reported in to me, no. As I say, we was on the estate and I wouldn't give them a time limit. You do it until you finish doing your block inspection properly, rather than say you need to be done in 15 minutes and they're racing around and don't do what they're supposed to do.
And then it took the time it took. Is that effectively
Yes.
your answer? And you had
Yes.
no concerns that they were either rushing it or taking
No, I didn't, no.
Did you ever have any concerns about whether the inspections were carried out properly or not?
I honestly didn't know.
Can we go to paragraph 38 of your first witness statement, please? Thank you. You say there that the results of weekly health and safety checks were recorded manually on inspection sheets until the handheld devices were issued.
Yes.
You see that? Can you recall when the PDA, the hand firefighter and the
Yeah,
PDAs,
sorry.
when they were issued to the ESAs?
I can't, but I'm making the assumption it must have been maybe 6 months before I left, because I didn't really have a lot to do with those and checking any of those.
Prior to the PDAs being issued, the hard copy checklists, where would they have been?
They were kept in their office, because they used to have an office that was next to Baseline Studios. And then when we went into the tower, they then came in and we was all together. But they had loads of files.
Do you know were they stored for a particularly long period, or how long they were stored for?
Yeah, I think so. I know Rob definitely kept everything.
You said paragraph 40, if we can scroll down in your witness statement, please. Thank you. The ESAs would carry out monthly health and safety checks. Now, in terms of these monthly checks, were they recorded in the same way, the information from them?
To my knowledge, they were.
So was that in hard copy prior to the PDAs and then on the PDAs?
I'm sure, yeah.
Can we go to your second witness statement at paragraph 5? Thank you. And just have a quick look at paragraph 5, please. You refer there to minor issues arising from the inspections, you recall saying that? Yeah.
Yep.
Can you recall any particular minor issues being raised by the ESAs in relation to fire safety specifically?
It would probably, I mean, this is not 100%, but in the work we do, it was probably someone's bike being left on the landing or someone putting plant pots outside on the landing, which obviously you're not allowed.
So what would, just help us with the process of resolving that as an issue, how would that be resolved?
Then they would report that back, and Janice Jones was the area housing manager, so she would then write to them to say you need to remove your bike or your plant pots, and then we'd go and check that they've removed them.
You say occasionally bigger issues emerged which required you to liaise with Janice Ray. What, if you could help us please, with the dividing line between a minor issue and a major issue that would require escalation to Janice Ray?
The only one I can really think of is when there was large amounts of rubbish dumped. And I'm not sure whether that was, there was one particular one where it's at the side of, I think it was Camelford. And it was Janice that I liaised with, and we had to look at a plan of how we could design out that area, because there was just, it was almost like a fly tip, just dumped. And, you know, people add to it, people set fire to it. But I couldn't say 100% whether it was Janice I had that conversation with. It may have been. But we ended up putting big, like flower beds in that area so people couldn't dump their rubbish there anymore.
The determination of whether to refer something to the health and safety team, was that was down to you, was it?
Yeah, because my guys would come to me.
Right.
And if it's something we couldn't resolve, I mean, 9 times out of 10 we could, because a lot of it's common sense stuff. Then obviously I always knew Janice was there, and she was really helpful, approachable. I could always go to Janice. So,
were you ever given any guidance or direction from Janice or anyone within TMO about issues that could be dealt with by you and your team, and issues that should be escalated?
no, not specifically.
Can I ask you about the process for reporting issues to Repairs Direct?
Mm-hmm.
The Repairs Direct came in 2013, is that right? You would have been in TMO
I don't know, but I guess so, yeah. I do know Repairs Direct.
You are familiar with the process of reporting to Repairs Direct?
Yes.
In any event. How would that be initiated then? A repair issue, how would that be reported to Repairs Direct?
Generally, people would call Repairs Direct themselves. We didn't really get involved in the repairs, but it's only if things weren't being done, or we might have a resident come into the office and complain that their heating's been out for 4 days, no one's been in contact, so we would then ring up and try and find out, just to be helpful to the resident, ring the repairs desk and say what's happening, we've got a resident in front of us, and try and get it resolved that way.
How would Repairs Direct respond to you or your team?
Well, obviously by just telling us, yes, this is noted, this is the job number, it's on a 5-day turnaround, whatever it was, but at least we then knew, because we could then say to the tenant, well, you reported it 2 days ago, unfortunately they're not going to come out, you've got an appointment for Friday, or, just to give them that information.
So would you monitor then the request at all?
No.
Would you only be aware if it hadn't happened when the estate service assistant checked and noted it hadn't happened, or a resident said it hasn't happened yet? Is that
yeah,
correct?
Because repairs wasn't under my management, so
you'd become involved at that point then when you...
Yeah, I would just literally get involved to be the liaison and just try and get things resolved.
Would anyone from your team or within TMO, as far as you're aware, check if Repairs Direct said they'd carried out a repair, for example, to a door closer, self-closing the door, would anyone check the work that they'd done?
They would check obviously on the next inspection that it had been done.
So if Repairs Direct had, for example, removed a door closer as opposed to fixed it, would that be picked up by anyone, as far as you're aware?
Yeah.
Who would pick
So if it was Grenfell, it would have been Paul. If it was on any of the other doors, it would have been Rob.
So if that, again, if I may, if it occurred as an example to a flat entrance door, would that only be picked up if Paul Stedman checked that flat entrance door on the next occasion?
He wouldn't be, to my knowledge, he wouldn't be checking front entrance doors, and I wouldn't be aware whether the door closer was working, not working, whether they had one or whether they didn't have one. I had no involvement in the front entrance doors whatsoever.
On this issue of reporting matters, what was the procedure if a tenant reported an issue with a fire safety measure or any fire safety advice? What was the process in that circumstance? Well,
quite often the issues around fire safety were through complaints from a particular resident when residents were allowed to bring large bulky items down to the ground floor level, put outside, and we had a contractors OCS that would clear it every 3 days, or sometimes Rob or Paul might pick it up and bring it over to Baseline Studios. So we had a big room where we would put all the bulk rubbish, and once it was full, the lorry would come, fill it up and then take it away. Residents should not have been dumping rubbish in the communal entrance, and I'd written to people to say, that's the fire hazard. And quite often it would either be from a particular resident saying that it's fire safety and we haven't done anything. Every day, almost every day, there was rubbish dumped in the communal entrance, and we had to clear it, but we were doing it 3 times a week. But even if we were there every day, you could have someone literally every day and there'd still be something there. So you could never have it free of rubbish because people were continually adding to it, which was frustrating.
Understand. Thinking of our example again, or generally speaking, was there ever any requirement to report issues with fire safety measures to the health and safety team within TMO? And any automatic requirement to report something to them?
Not unless, a lot of it was around rubbish, and then we would clear it, so we didn't have to report it back. But as I say, that when there was that big issue, I think it was near Camelford, that's when I'm sure I'll just speak to Janice, but that's when we come up with, we need a plan how to stop this happening.
Okay. Can I ask you now about actions that arose from the fire risk assessments that were carried out on Lancaster West? And you talk about fire risk assessments in your witness statement, which we'll come on to. Your first witness statement at paragraph 31. I wonder if we could pull that paragraph up, please, operator. And zoom in. Do you see paragraph 31, Ms. Rumble?
Yes.
Just have a quick look at that.
I think we'll have it expanded so you can read it more easily.
Thank you.
That's okay, I can see it.
There we are.
Thank you.
Yes.
You're aware that there was the fire risk assessor was called Carl Stokes. You rarely spoke to him.
Yes.
Over the course of your time working for the TMO, could you tell us how often you did speak to him or how many times you spoke to him?
I don't think I did speak to him.
You didn't at all?
Don't think so.
Right. So that would follow you didn't ever raise any concerns about fire safety with him?
No.
Were you ever provided with the assessments that Mr. Stokes carried out for Lancaster West or Grenfell Tower?
Not that he done, but when we saw him on the estate, we knew that a spreadsheet would be. A spreadsheet will be coming from Janice Ray, because whenever he went round, then we'd get this big spreadsheet from Janice, colour coded what was urgent, and then I would cut and paste the bits what related to Paul and the bits that related to Rob, and say, right, you need to do these, because Janice used to report back, I believe, to the corporate health and safety group, and we didn't want her not being able to report back to say that things had been completed.
So you would never have actually seen the fire risk assessments, just Janice Ray's categorisation of actions arising from them?
Yes.
If you didn't ever see the fire risk assessments, could you have known about the range of fire safety measures that were present and necessary on Lancaster West and in Grenfell Tower? Would you have ever known that?
No.
Was consideration of the fire risk assessments an important part of your role for TMO at all?
Well, yes.
And that's in the context of having actions from them completed by Rob and Paul?
And to my knowledge, it would go up the line. So I didn't want anyone coming back to us saying that we wasn't doing our job. So we would make sure they were done. But quite often, because Carl would pick up on really little things, which obviously was good, but quite often the guys would go round and stuff would already have been removed. So it might be black bag outside such and such an address and fridge outside here. And when the guys went round, they'd already been cleared. So he would pick up on, everything, which was good.
You've talked a little bit about the actions that arose. So paragraph 31, again, if you're witness statement, which is up, the last sentence, it says Janice Ray would generate spreadsheets, which I think is what you told us about. How soon after seeing Carl Stokes on the estate would you receive these spreadsheets?
I couldn't say, because we wouldn't always see him around, but when we did, we knew that we'd be getting spreadsheets following his visit. So I don't think it was too long after.
Can you help us with hours, days, weeks, months?
Probably be unfair if I did, but it wouldn't be hours. It wouldn't be months, so I guess it would be within weeks. Because like I say, when we'd see him, we thought, oh, here comes a load of work from Janice. And that's just...
So you said weeks there, is that?
I think so. I think that's fair to say, but I couldn't say with 100% accuracy.
Right.
Obviously, you would have to know from when he'd done his inspection to when Janice emailed those over.
Right. And I think you told us that those spreadsheets were colour-coded.
Yes.
Right? Can you remember the colour coding?
Yeah, the amber, red, amber and green.
3 colours?
Yes.
And what was the
So
time
red
frame
was,
for each? Can you recall?
well, straight away, red. Amber, you had a bit more. I couldn't tell you the times, but we looked at them all the same. Whatever was on those lists, again, because we was so centrally based, it was like, just get out, do the job, so we can send it back to Janice saying all completed.
You said red straight away. Can you give us a little bit more detail on what straight away meant?
Well, I would say the same day, but that's just me from my looking at it. If I got something like that, red means it's urgent, and we're all on this state, there's no reason why Paul couldn't go and do it that same day, and likewise with Rob. And I don't think there was ever an issue them doing that.
So, may I again summarise what I understand you saying? Spreadsheet would come in from Janice Ray.
Yes.
You'd look at the red actions. Paul or Rob may be sitting in the office with you,
Yep.
and you would say, "Can you go and complete
Yeah.
this action?"
Yeah.
How would you monitor that they'd been completed?
Because they had to report back to me, because I then had to put the information into the spreadsheet, and I was the one responsible for sending it back to Janice.
So it would depend on them telling you. You didn't go and check yourself, for example.
No, because otherwise I would have been doing those inspections.
Did you ever, in an appraisal exercise, check that they'd done what they'd said they'd done, or did you just trust them?
No, but I walked around the estate myself as well sometimes, so...
On those occasions, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, but not that I sat back in the office and just believed everything they told me. I knew they was out there. Cole, I don't know how often he'd done his visits, but he would be back. If something wasn't done, then it would come to light some way, or a resident would complain.
You said you would have walked around the estate. Would you?
No, I often walked around the estate, yeah.
Would you ever have done so with the spreadsheet of FRA actions to check that they've been done?
Can't say I did, no.
So you would have assigned that work to them. They would have come back and said, "Yeah, it's done." You'd have checked that off and sent that information off to Janice Ray.
Yes.
And again, how would you have done that? In an email, a spreadsheet?
On the actual spreadsheet that she sent, so there was a box where you could put your information in, save it, and then send it back.
Right. Did residents ever complain about the length of time it would take for the TMO to resolve any issues identified in the fire risk assessments?
Not to my knowledge, no.
You don't recall?
I don't think they knew that we'd done the fire risk assessments.
Can we move now to the minutes of the Health and Safety Operational Meeting on the 23rd of February 2015? The document references TMO 00869479.
Could you just look at that document? Now, to be clear, you're not listed as being in attendance at this meeting.
Thank you. You weren't at the meeting?
No.
Would you ever have attended these meetings, the Health and Safety Operational Committee meetings?
I don't think so.
Would you ever have attended any Health and Safety Committee? There are a number of Health and Safety Committees at TMO during the course of your employment. Would you ever have attended any of them?
I don't recall, unless I'm on any minutes of any, but I don't recall. No, I was really anything to do with Lancaster West. We got on and done our own stuff at Lancaster West. The TMO had meetings I wasn't involved in.
Would you have been sent the minutes of a Health and Safety Committee
I doubt
meetings? If you had been sent them, do you ever recall reading any minutes after
it.
the...
Well, if I had them, I'm sure I would have read them, but I don't ever recall being... It's not the same structure that how I kind of work in now. You know, if there's meetings, you get minutes, people keep you involved. It wasn't like that at the TMO. Lancaster West was pretty much on its own.
Okay. Can we look at these minutes at the bottom of the page, under the heading FRA Stats? You see what's recorded there. JW confirmed that there had been an improvement in the number of outstanding FRAs. AB had a contractor who was undertaking the FRAs in each. After a recent review, Lancaster West has now become a priority, and JW and Siobhan Rumble are in discussions about this. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Do you remember that 2015?
I don't know.
Don't remember any discussion with Janice Ray about outstanding FRA actions in Lancaster West?
No. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but
No, of course.
I don't remember it. Yeah.
Do you recall why Lancaster West may have become a priority at that stage?
No, I don't.
There was a call service carried out a fire risk assessment on the 17th of October 2014 in Lancaster West. In Grenfell Tower. Do you recall whether there were a lot of actions rising from that were a priority?
My recollection is whenever we received those spreadsheets from Janice, I would send Paul and Rob to go and check the stuff that was on there. As I say, it wasn't major stuff on there to my knowledge, and then we would send it back.
You don't recall any specific incident or issue arising in 2015? No?
No. The only one from the FRA I really remember was the Camelford. They had like little cages in next to the houses. It was like a communal entrance, and they was all blocked up with people's belongings, and that was raised by Carl. And I remember speaking to Janice about that because I think several years earlier Janice had done a letter saying what you can and can't keep in these cages. And then, so I remember her giving me the detail of that letter, and we then wrote to people. We had to go and follow it up and make sure they cleared all those cages.
Can I ask you to look next, and can I ask you again about these self-closing devices on doors briefly? Can we look at TMO 00859693? That should be an email from Janice Ray to you. Yes, thank you. That email, she sent it to you on the 17th of December. Just have a look at that. It says, "Hi Siobhan, our fire risk assessor has raised his concern that in conversation with a few of the tenants at Grenfell Tower, they've advised that Seamus had disconnected the self-closures on their flat entrance door. In at least one of these cases, this was said to be due to the tenant perpetually locking himself out of his flat." Do you recall that email?
No.
Can we scroll up to your response, which is at the top of the chain?
Before we do, can you just remind us who Seamus was?
Yeah, Seamus was our handyman.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Yes, Ms. Gad, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that's Seamus Dunley, is that correct?
Yes.
Right. And you say in this email that you've told him?
Yeah.
Now, do you remember a conversation with Mr. Dunley where you discussed removing closures?
I actually don't. And when I saw this email, I thought, well, obviously, me and Janice must have had a conversation. And from Janice's email, she's saying that they had found out he was removing them. Please tell him to stop doing it. And so, obviously, I must have had a conversation with him because my response was told him. This is where I actually rang a colleague because I was thinking, I don't remember this because we didn't really touch front doors. And I said, do you remember this? And why would he have taken those off? And he said that the doors were really stiff and sometimes old people found it really hard to get in their properties or open the door to get out, and he removed some of the door closers. But I didn't know that at the time.
Right. Your evidence says that you don't recollect this.
No, I didn't.
Discussion.
This is why I clarified with a colleague.
You may not recollect then whether you checked he'd stopped doing it.
Well, if I've responded to Janice to say told him, then I've 100% had a conversation with Seamus.
Do you recall if you checked whether he was doing it at any stage after this email?
No.
Correspondence between you
And to be honest, I wouldn't have known the implications of taking that closer off a front entrance door.
You wouldn't have known the implications?
No. Maybe I should have done, but no, I don't.
Well, yes. Did you take any action in relation to the door closures that Mr. Dunley had removed?
No, because like I say, I wouldn't have known that they were part of the fire rigs on their front entrance door.
Would you know if anyone replaced the door closures that Mr. Dunley had removed? Do you know if Mr. Dunley did that?
I don't know. I doubt it, if he took them off.
Did you ever ask or check when any other TMO staff were or may have been removing door closures?
I doubt it. Seamus was the handyman, so if he was, Rob and Paul wouldn't be doing stuff like that, not to my knowledge.
What about external contractors engaged by TMO?
Then I wouldn't know, because if they've got any contract with the front entrance doors, because they, like I say, they weren't part of our inspections. It was only the communal doors, not front entrance doors.
Right, and you wouldn't have checked after they'd been to look at the door?
No,
Would anyone have checked?
I don't know.
Can we look next then about at some email correspondence which is about stay put advice given? So that's that email is at TMO 10001677. The first email in the chain, if you can scroll down, is on the third page of that. If you can scroll down to the bottom, please, operator. There's an email from you to Janice Ray on the 9th of October 2012. You say, "Good afternoon, Janice. I've been going through our security document with the manager at Axis, and there were two things he asked me that I wasn't sure about and was hoping you could help me. He wanted to know who our fire marshals were. He asked if we have an evacuation procedure for Grenfell Tower in the event of a fire." Again, do you remember this email exchange?
No, it's a long time, no.
Can you remember who Axis were?
Other than contractors, no.
Can you remember why the manager at Axis wanted to know about the evacuation procedure?
I really don't, sorry.
What type of contractors were they?
I don't know.
In terms of an evacuation procedure, did you know, before you emailed Janice Wright, did you know if there was one in place at Grenfell Tower?
No, I know that it was a stay put policy, like many blocks are. And I think there's lots of documentation that was out there to say it was saying it was stay put. I think there was leaflets near the lift, or I know that it was put in our newsletters, and that's, yeah.
Can we look then at Janice Wright's response, which, thank you, so she responds the same day. "Hi Siobhan, according to our last list, the fire marshals for Grenfell were Victoria and Adeola." She explains that Adeola relocated and Victoria is off just now. And Janice Wright says that the estate officers and the estate inspectors are trained annually in fire safety, so any of them should be able to act in this capacity. That's as a fire marshal at Grenfell Tower. Were you aware of that there was an expectation that they would act in the stead of Victoria and Adeola prior to this email?
I can't recall, no.
Did you ever discuss acting as a fire marshal with any estate inspectors?
No.
We talked a moment ago, or you told us a moment ago about the stay put policy. Mm-hmm. Did you know any of the detail of the stay put policy?
No, only that obviously if the fire was in your flat, then you get out. It's common sense. But other than that, stay in your flat. It was a concrete building, so it would never have spread. And if it was a flat, the fire brigade would come and put the fire out that was in that flat, and then people would be okay.
Did you ever ask Janice Ray for assistance with how someone would evacuate if the fire was in their flat, for example?
I don't remember, no.
You were aware that there were residents of Grenfell Tower who could be described as having mobility issues or vulnerabilities, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you ever discuss with Janice Ray what to do in the event of a fire for those residents?
No.
You ever question anyone in TMO about what
No.
those residents would do or should do in the event of a fire?
No, because my, again, understanding is the stay put policy, the fire brigade will come and they will deal with the situation.
Ms. Ray in that email goes on to say in the final paragraph, on a related note, can you please advise who carries out the weekly testing of the Grenfell fire alarm? If there is a training need which is preventing this from being tested, then please let me know and I will ask Ricky to sort. Your response, which should come above that email, if we can scroll up to that, please, operator. You see your response there? Okay, great. Yes, there is a training issue would be grateful if you could arrange for us to have this. Now, what has happened is Janice Ray has asked you whether there's a training need. You haven't gone directly to Janice. It's a reactive as opposed to what might be described as proactive. Is that correct?
In this instance, yeah.
Were there any other occasions where something similar happened? There was a reactive request for training as opposed to a proactive request.
Not that I can remember.
So would any training have been done on a reactive basis then?
Not to my knowledge, other than I think it was when it was reported one of the fire extinguishers was condemned. And then I can't remember 100%, but I think that's when I might have asked for some refresher training for Rob and Paul.
Right. Can we look next, please, at email correspondence from October 2014. The reference is IWS 0001948. If we could please zoom in on that, on that chain, please, operator. If we go down, scroll down to the bottom, please. So your email, sorry, it's from Beverly Coleman to you, 3rd of October 2014. And what Ms. Coleman says is, following our conversation, above resident called regarding the walkway of Grenfell Tower stairs has been blocked off, not in use since last night. Resident was very annoyed due health and safety in case of a fire. Also said she called both RLO for riding. Maxine is on holiday and Christina Mobile went straight to voicemail. Your response, if we can scroll up to it, please. I'd like you to look at the second paragraph there. Do you see, in the event of a fire, do you see that?
Yes.
As we know, there is a stay-put policy and evacuation would be via the lift, not the stairwell. Anyhow, the barrier would be moved in this case. So we see there appears to be your knowledge of there may be circumstances where evacuation is necessary with a stay-put policy. Is that correct?
Yes, but even reading that now, I know you shouldn't get in a lift if there's a fire, so, but it says what it says, yeah.
Well, with that, can you recall why you said that at the time?
No, because obviously there was only two ways out, either the stairs or the lift. And they had, I can't remember how many floors in Grenfell Tower.
Can I ask you to think about that response? Can you recall whether you said, you referred to use of the lift because you had been told to say that, or because you assumed that was how evacuation should be conducted?
I really don't know. But I don't think, well, I don't know.
Can I move on now to asking you some questions about responding to deficiency notices? Now, you're aware of what a deficiency notice from the London Fire Brigade is? Have you ever heard that term before?
I think I have, but I don't know in relation to what.
Perhaps we can look. Can we go, please, to an email sent on the 27th of March 2014. The URN, operator, please, is TMO 00856923. And if we can go to the third page, we should have an email from Janice Ray. Yeah, you see that at the bottom of the page? Thank you, operator. Just have a look at that, please. Do you recall that email?
Not specifically, no.
Can we look at the deficiency notice itself? So that is at TMO 10005646. No, looking at that, does that document ring any bells with you? Do you recall seeing that?
Just looking at it, no, I don't.
Could we scroll to the third page of that, which is the schedule? And can we, yeah, thank you, operator. Just point out to you then, this is the schedule of including areas of concern that the LFB had noted. Does this ring any bells or cause you to recall?
It really doesn't, no. But I know I'm copied in on the email, but no.
Can you help us with whether you would have opened the document up and looked at it?
Well, I'm sure I would have done if it was sent to me to ask for me to comment, but I'm just wondering if it was something, because where Alex was copied in, I can't remember his job title, whether it was something he done and I was copied in, I don't know. But this is not something I'd look at and say, oh, I remember those.
Right. Can you recall whether you took any action in respect to this deficiency notice?
I can't recall because I don't even remember this notice.
Can you recall whether anyone else did?
No.
Would you have known if anyone else had taken action in respect to it? We touched a moment ago, I'm going to move on to a slightly different topic. We touched on it a moment ago, this issue of residents with restricted mobility or vulnerable residents in Grenfell Tower. Whose responsibility was it to collect information on residents with disabilities or mobility issues or vulnerabilities in Grenfell Tower?
I don't think it was anyone's responsibility to go collecting it. When people were on the register for housing, then that information should have been given to RBKC as part of their request for housing. Then that would have been looked at by the people who done the allocations. And if they thought that they were fit and that met their need, then they would be housed. After that, if they had any mobility issues, then they would speak to Janice, the housing officer, who would liaise with RBKC and get them whatever support they needed. Because sometimes,
No, carry on.
Sometimes when people, they might have been okay when they moved in, but then have issues later on and have to move out. So what would happen is they would speak to Janice, she would take the details, she would liaise with, they had 2 support workers at RBKC, and they would then speak to them. They might have to contact the doctor to get medical advice and support their application for a move.
Right.
And that's how it worked.
Can I just ask you to clarify, the Janice you're talking to is?
Janice Jones.
Janice Jones.
My housing officer, yeah.
No, were you ever told that you were responsible for collecting information about vulnerabilities in TMO premises?
Not directly like that, but sometimes we've done lots of exercises where we would do tenancy audits. Not that that wasn't part of collecting that information, but there might be where we filled in lots of questionnaires and forms when we were doing the regeneration. And to my knowledge, I think we were then looking at people who to move out. So I think you're constantly looking at stuff like that.
Right. You told us very helpfully that there were lots of ways in which lots of questions. Can you help us in a little more detail what kind of questionnaires or the names of those questionnaires or exercises were? You referred to tenancy audits. Were there any others?
I mean, the tenancy audit we done was literally it was primarily to see if people were subletting. So it's a pretty straightforward form. But then a new form was introduced by Teresa Brown, what was about kind of 50 pages long from what I remember. So that would have collected loads and loads of data. But there would be other forms. I mean, some obviously I've listened to the inquiry, but some we knew, we would knock, how do people want to be consulted? Because, we would do evening meetings and we'd be sitting there might be 2 people turn up. So we'd do afternoons, mornings. So you'd gather information and ask them about the works and what they liked or didn't like. So there was lots of communications going on.
I understand. Can I ask you to look again at your first witness statement, paragraph 37, please, operator? You see that?
Yes.
So what I'm going to ask you about is the spreadsheet recording information about vulnerable residents. Now, can I ask you to look at document TMO 00880-587, please? you recall, do you recognise that document?
Not 100%, but I think that looks like what I'd asked for the information for the vulnerable list or elderly list I wanted for Seamus. It was for some extra work for Seamus to do. But I think it's kind of got a bit blown up in my witness statement because I couldn't remember exactly first whether we held a spreadsheet, whether we updated it. And then I remember David Noble, he was kind of like the go-to person for information. And the only reason I'd asked for this information was because sometimes Seamus, he was a handyman and he had some time on his hands. He cared about the people on the estate. So what I done, I thought if I get a list of all that, and I can't remember whether I actually said vulnerable people or elderly people in Grenfell Tower. So I'd asked David for that list, and then I set Seamus a target of trying to do 6 courtesy calls a week. And that was just to fill his downtime. And that was literally just to do a door knock and say, is there anything I can help you with? So it might have been, might have had an elderly or a vulnerable person sitting in dark because they couldn't change a light bulb. And that was obviously not part of our job. But Seamus could do that. So he would fix people's doors or change washers on taps. And that's why I had that spreadsheet, and he would work his way through that spreadsheet.
Right. Can I just go back a couple of steps from what you said? This spreadsheet, does it look similar?
It does look similar because it was just a list of names and addresses.
And the way you'd obtain such a spreadsheet is by asking someone to provide it to you?
Yes.
Right. The information that was inputted that made up that spreadsheet, do you know where it came from?
Sign-ups, the information from sign-ups. Stuff that we gathered on the estate, because as I say, people like the team knew people on the estate very well and got on with them very well. They'd worked there for years. So you might have someone who's just come out of hospital having an operation and is quite unwell. So then they would feed that back to David Noble if it was something that was going to be maybe long term. So we would just, I guess they would just email David through.
Would that process, that helpful example of someone who's just come out of hospital, would that information then be fed through on was it required to be fed through, or was it just on an ad hoc basis?
Yeah, on an ad hoc basis, I believe.
Right. This information then was in existence, or these lists were in existence before you started working for the TMOs?
I don't think they were lists. I think they're all in the system. So you could say to David, could you give me a list of all the maybe Portuguese-speaking people? Whatever it was, I think he could take that data out of the system.
Right. And you would then give the list to Seamus Dundee and ask him to go and pay courtesy calls?
I did. That was a one-off exercise I wanted to do with Seamus to fill some downtime, but also to help the residents on the estate.
Understand. And the criteria for that exercise was, did you say elderly or vulnerable?
You know what? I honestly can't remember whether I said, because as I'm reading this, I'm going, oh, did I say vulnerable? Did I say elderly? I suspect it might have been whoever was on the vulnerable list, because it's to help whoever you can help.
As part of that help, was there any consideration given by you or anyone to asking residents about needs in the event of a fire?
No.
Evacuation?
No.
Like that? Was it clear to you that there may have been such people living in Grenfell?
That
would have had difficulty in the event of a fire?
I don't doubt, yes. But like I said, I believe that it's a stay put policy. The fire brigade would turn up and they will then help those people to safety. That was my understanding.
We may come back to that issue in a moment, but sticking with these sheets, were these spreadsheets, as far as you're aware, spreadsheets that were retained as a spreadsheet in the system, or were they always generated depending on the request that was made?
Yeah, my understanding is that he generated this one for me, sent it to me in an Excel spreadsheet, which is what I kept and then gave to Seamus, probably emailed it to Seamus saying, this is the list, start at the top and work your way through and try and do, I believe I gave him a target of 6 a week.
Can we look at your first witness statement, paragraph 37? please, operator. Last sentence, Ms. Rumble.
Yep.
Janice Jones or Dion Wilkes would add residents to this list if needed.
Yeah.
Now,
I don't think, yeah, I think I've mixed that up. When I say that I believe the list was in already in existence, I mean, the information was already in existence. And as I say, I couldn't remember whether they updated it or not, but I now know that they didn't. And I think even when I watched David, it clarified for me, listening to David, exactly how that information was updated.
would that have been then, is it possible that Janice Jones and Dion Wilkes may have contacted David Noble with information about?
I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did.
And again, that would have been on an ad hoc basis.
Yes, it would. And it would just be via an email.
Can we look in, I think it's your third witness statement, paragraph 13. It's, yes, third witness statement, TMO 00870943. It's about the capita system, paragraph 13. You say you can't recall using it.
No.
Would others have used that system, the capita system?
I'm sure. I mean, I've worked in different places and there's always different names for different systems, so I really can't remember this one. And quite often, when you're managing the team, they're the ones who are using the system. You don't usually have to use the system, you're managing them to use it. But CRM wasn't there. I think that was introduced after I left. Well, I think I know it was introduced after I left.
You've told us that the information was inputted on an ad hoc basis. Would you accept that as a consequence of that, there may have been residents who did have vulnerabilities or issues that may have been missed from this list or this information?
I'm sure, but unless a resident comes forward and tells you that they need support or help, you're not going to know. Unless you're visiting them for another reason and it comes out in conversation, you wouldn't know that. You just wouldn't know that.
There is no system or process or audit in place to ensure that the information was accurate? No one ever checked it?
Checked what?
The
Sorry.
information contained on the system held by that David Noble could access? No,
I guess it would have been put in at the time and accurate at the time. Whether that was reviewed, I can't tell you that. But we wouldn't have been the ones to review that.
Was there any guidance given of what exactly constituted a vulnerability or someone who should be added to, whose information should be added to?
Yeah, I don't think at that time specifically, but vulnerable was, it could be anybody who needed extra help. So whether it was, you know, some mental health issues, it could have, as I say, like someone could have broken their legs, they're in a cast for 8 weeks. It really does depend, yeah, whoever needed support and help.
Would you ever have considered whether ability to evacuate in the event of a fire was something that should be investigated or information collected on that issue? Would that ever have been?
Well, it sounds absolutely necessary now, but at the time, no, because like I say, unfortunately, it's a stay put policy. Unless the fire's in your flat, you stay there, and the fire brigade will come and they will assist the people who need assisting. And even having looked at this now, and obviously with everything that's going on with the peeps and where I currently work, it's like, well, what exactly could we do if we had a peeps? Do you know what I mean? I'm asking myself that question now. What could I do? And I think the only thing we can do is literally check these people, and whoever couldn't get out in a fire needs to be rehoused.
Well, it's possible. Do you think that someone who had mobility difficulties might need some assistance in evacuating the building because of a fire in his or her own flat, or maybe in the communal area? I mean, the concept of evacuation, even in the context of an overall stay-put policy, was still there, wasn't it?
Yeah. But who would do that? I'm not sure.
Well, that's the question.
Yeah, who would do that? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
One more question on this issue, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Of course. Yeah.
The sheet that we looked at, who could access it? Was it only David Noble, or could anyone generate that sheet?
Like I said in the statement in the beginning, I was thinking, I'm sure we could all access it because I had the Excel spreadsheet. But no, the data that went via David in his system, I don't believe we had access to that.
Was the only way of accessing that through
Asking.
Mr. Noble?
Yes. And there was no issue because if we needed something, then David would give us what we needed, providing we was allowed to have it.
And if I may, in the context of an emergency, if you'd needed a list of that information, you would have had to have gone to Mr. Noble. You couldn't have generated it or found that information in another way yourself.
I don't believe so.
Mr. Chairman, these are the questions on that issue. Would it be an appropriate time to...
Yes, are you moving on to something else?
Yes.
Well, it probably would be a good time, wouldn't it? Yes, all right, thank you. As I think we said, Ms. Rumble, we have a break during the morning. You probably know that anyway. So we'll take it at this point and we'll come back at 25 to 12, please. And I have to ask you, as I've asked all other witnesses, please don't talk about your evidence to anyone while you're out of the room. All right?
Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Would you like to give the ushers in, please? Good. Thank you, Mr. Gade. Just for my own interest, how are we going along? Are we roughly in line with expectations?
I would hesitate to say I think we may be slightly ahead of expectations, Mr. Chairman says.
Oh, well, that's not a message you often get. All right. Thank you very much.
I shouldn't have said it.
I'll see. 25 to 12, please. Thank you. Would you ask Ms Rumble to come back in, please? Thank you. All right, Ms Rumble, ready to carry on?
Yes, thank you.
Good, thank you very much. Yes, Mr Gadd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Rumble, in the break, I've discussed the transcript feed which comes through with the transcriber. And one issue is that if you or I talk over each other, it gets missed in the transcript. I will try my best to make sure I don't talk over you. Would you
I'll do
mind?
the same, sorry.
Not at all. It's one thing that happens with these. I'm going to ask you first of all about some evidence that you gave us earlier this morning and I'm going to ask you to look at the transcript. Operator, could you go to the transcript from this morning, page 13, please? And it's line 10. Do you see that, Ms Rumble? I asked a question. You were also aware that there was a fire brigade drop key which could be used by the ESAs or the fire brigade too, and there's an example of
Yes.
talk over. And then on down the transcript, just at the bottom of page 13, I asked the question, the fire brigade drop key, were you? Who told you about that? Who informed you about it? You said, I think just Paul and Rob when they'd done their checks. Now, can I just ask you about that again? What were the checks that you were referring to there?
I think that it was to make sure the doors opened. I think the drop key was at the top of the lift and it was like a T key from memory.
So the drop key was kept by the lift?
No, I don't think it was kept by the lift. I think it must have been in their office with all the keys.
Right, sorry.
They used to go around like jailers with loads of keys. Sorry.
The T that you were referring to, that's a box into which the key was inserted, is that correct?
I think it was like, like an FB1 key. It's like a T shape. And I remember there's like a little hole at the top of the lift. And this is just from memory, I might be wrong, but I think they would put the key in and turn it, and I think it opens the doors. And it was just to check that was working.
And that key,
if I've got that right.
That key, as far as you recall, was kept in the office or on there?
I believe so, or it could have been on. I mean, they had, honestly, lots and lots of keys because they was always about the estate, so.
The checks that were carried out, they were done by Paul and or Rob.
Yes.
Did the fire brigade ever come and carry out checks?
I'm sure they did because there's lots of reference to the fire brigade coming and conversations between the fire brigade and Janice, but I wasn't involved in arranging any of those, so I didn't meet them.
Would you have been involved in any way? Would they have come into the office, for example, beforehand and asked for the key or anything?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Can I then return to the thread of the questions that we were dealing with before the break? I'm going to ask you next about the fire risk assessments. Can I ask you to look, please, at CST *000 3084. Now, just have a quick look at that.
Yep.
Do you recognise it?
I don't know.
Do you recall if you would have provided any information to Mr. Stokes to assist him in the preparation of this fire risk assessment?
Not at all. I don't ever remember having a conversation with Carl Stokes. He would primarily just be walking around the estate, picking up issues and then reporting back to Janice Ray. And we got that information via the fire risk assessment sent through from Janice.
Right. Can we look at page 20 in that document? And you see there's a title, 13 disabled people.
Yes.
You see that? And you see then underneath that it says, it is considered that the building is provided with reasonable arrangements for means of escape for disabled people. And the question box is ticked yes. Do you see that?
Yes.
Would you have ever seen that aspect of that report?
Not that I recall, not at all.
Were you aware of what those means of the reasonable arrangements for means of escape were for disabled people?
No.
In the comments box, Mr Stokes has written, at the time of the risk assessment, there was no evidence of any resident within the premises who suffers from sensory impairment to such a level that would prevent them from hearing a shouted warning of fire or a loud knocking on their entrance door to warn them. This is shortly after well, perhaps a year after you joined TMO, but what Mr Stokes has said in that assessment, does that accord with your recollection of the residents in Grenfell in November 2012?
It doesn't, but my question would be where he got this information, because how would he know that?
Do you know where he got the
No, I
information?
don't know.
He never
But he would
asked.
have to speak to someone to get that information unless he door knocked people, which I don't think he would have done.
The next paragraph is, TMO have recently introduced a comprehensive programme to gathering information about tenants, including any disabilities and their physical ability and mobility to respond to any emergency situations. This information will be imputed on a TP tracker system and held centrally. Were you aware of that comprehensive programme other than that which we discussed before the break?
I wasn't, no.
Would you have been aware of it if it had existed, do you think, as area housing?
Not always, because the TMO done lots of things, and we wasn't always made aware, because obviously it wasn't just Lancaster West. There was the north and south of the borough, so we wasn't always involved in everything they did.
There was reference there to a TP tracker system. Did you ever know of it or have access to such a system?
No, the first time I heard that was when I was listening to David's evidence.
Right. In so much as Mr Stokes says that there's a comprehensive programme of information gathering, is that incorrect as far as you're concerned?
No, maybe it was probably correct, but that was something the TMO done and maybe held and not necessarily shared with us at Lancaster West.
Probably correct, but you didn't know about it.
No.
Then I think it's over the page. If we could go over the page, please, operator. Mr Stokes says the additional information will be used to assess if residents may require additional devices to provide them with early warning of smoke, fire in their home and or development of PEEPs. Now, again, you mentioned PEEPs before the break. You're familiar with it now?
Now I am, yeah.
When did you become familiar with it first?
When I was being asked to give evidence, and I saw PEEPs, and I was thinking, I looked into it and I thought, well, I've never done any personal evacuation plans.
Had you ever heard of it before?
I don't recall I had, no.
You don't recall ever hearing discussion of personal emergency evacuation plans or PEEPs at TMO?
No, I don't.
What about your previous roles? I think you...
No, because they were different roles. I was a head of income, so that didn't have any bearing on this. And then previous roles before that were like housing officer roles. So I wouldn't have been aware.
Do I take it follows then that you never referred any resident to
Definitely
anyone
not.
for a PEEP? Would you have known who to refer such a resident to?
Yes, if I'd have known about PEEPs, then my go-to person would have been Janice.
Looking back now, do you consider that during your time of your employment with TMO, there may have been residents in Grenfell Tower who you may have referred to for a PEEP, had you known about them at the time?
100%. There would have been people, definitely, that we would do PEEPs with, but I didn't know that at the time.
Can we move 2 years ahead? Mr Stokes produces another fire risk assessment in October 2014. That's at CST quadruple 0092. Hope I've got that right. No, that's similar document to previously. The date has changed, obviously, 17th of October 2014. It's during the time of your currency at TMO. Do you remember seeing that document?
I don't. I can only assume that these maybe were what Carl filled in and sent to Janice, just looking at them, but I know I wouldn't have seen anything like this.
You wouldn't have seen it.
I don't believe so.
Can we look at page 21? Now, we looked at this in the 2012 FRA. In this one, 2 years later, the wording appears to be the same. Do you agree?
Yes.
And what Mr. Stokes says is, again, a recently introduced system. So TMO have recently introduced a comprehensive programme to gather information. That appears to be the same language.
I
Now,
believe so.
you say you didn't see this FRA. In October 2014, was there, or were you aware of a recently introduced system to gather information about vulnerabilities or disabilities?
No, not that I can remember.
Is the answer the same as before? There may have been one, you just weren't aware of it?
Yes.
In 2014, well, sorry, I won't ask you that question. Can we look next to the document, which is the Fire Safety Strategy? Please go to TMO 00830598. Thank you. This document is TMO Fire Safety Strategy. Have you seen this document before?
Not that I recall.
You don't recall reading it then?
No, and I don't know. Yeah, no.
Did you know such a document? Do you recall such a document being in existence?
I don't know. Again, not saying there wasn't one, but not that I can remember.
Can you... Sorry, forgive me. Can we look at Janice Ray's witness statement, or one of her witness statements to the inquiry, please? The reference for that is TMO 00847305, and it's page 35. Please, operator. Paragraphs 114 and 115. Could you just have a read of those two paragraphs, please?
Yep.
Having seen what Janice Ray says about PEEPs, can you recall being advised of any system whereby you could advise the health and safety team of a vulnerable resident who may require a PEEP?
No.
You were never aware of this as a...
I wasn't, no. I mean, my colleagues would see vulnerable people and speak to them about their needs, but not in relation to having a home fire safety visit. Maybe they did, but I can't recall that. I know that the fire brigade did go round when, I think, whether to do with the smoke alarms, but I'm not sure who arranged those visits.
In the years that you worked as manager in Lancaster West, was there any circumstance or time at which you considered or were asked to consider the evacuation of vulnerable residents?
No, never.
It was never something that
Never.
came up as far as you recall?
No.
Can I ask you some questions now about communications you had with some residents? Throughout the project, the refurbishment project, you attended resident meetings, is that correct?
Yes.
Can we look at your second witness statement, please? Paragraph 7. The reference is TMO. Thank you. You have it. You tell us there about opinions that you offered during the meetings. Can you give us any more detail about the subject matter of your opinions, or what kind of things you would have given an opinion on?
I'm not too sure at the. I mean, I know I attended the meetings, but I was more of a liaison between Rydens and the TMO. But
I think you gave us an indication of that in your first witness statement. Perhaps we can just look at that. TMO, quadruple zero, double zero, sorry. TMO 000000891. Forgive me. Paragraph 22 on page 5, please. Thank you. Just, if you don't mind refreshing your memory there, you say essentially, I was there as a familiar face to the residents and to be the liaison between the residents and those directly involved in the refurbishment.
yes.
Can you recall at this stage what the general consensus or opinion was of residents in respect to the refurbishment? Were they in support of it, or were they against it?
I think initially the majority of residents were quite happy that there was going to be a lot of money spent on the tower. It was well needed. But unfortunately, there was just literally a handful of residents that had an issue from before my time, who, no matter what you done, they would just, you couldn't have an evening meeting. They'd be shouting and screaming in the meetings. We'd have to stop the meetings. They would discourage people from coming to the community, like to consultation meetings. And it was just really difficult, because I think most people were happy that they were getting new windows and new heating systems. You know.
Do you recall any concerns that were raised? Can you just give us some detail about particular concerns that may have been raised by residents with regard to
There was a few. I mean, I remember when they was originally told the HIU unit was going in their kitchen, and then when the work started, we then found out that some people were saying they're being told it's going in the hallway, and they wasn't happy. And I remember being at a meeting at the TMO, and in that meeting said, you know, is this true? Are they being put in the hallway? Because people are not happy. It was true. And I said, well, I'm not being funny. If I thought in my house it was going in the kitchen, then someone tried to put it in the hallway, I wouldn't be very happy either. So I remember kind of sticking up for the residents then. But then it becomes such an issue. I think that's when Mr. DeFarn was telling people to put all notices on their door and stop people doing any works, that I think that was overturned in the end, and people could then have it in the kitchen.
Right. You mentioned Mr. DeFarn. Can I ask you about specific correspondence between you and Mr. DeFarn? It's an email that you were sent on the 15th of June 2012. The reference is TMO 1003 7666. So the second email on that page, you see, it's the email from Mr. DeFarn. Yeah, sent at 9:39 on the 15th of June. It starts, Dear Siobhan, please would you be kind enough to email me and let me know. Just have a read of that, please.
Mm-hmm.
So he's asking about consultation with architects and to influence the designs. The next email at the top of the page, you say, good morning, Eddie. Mark emailed me yesterday to say he was busy but would call last night. I'm guessing he was still busy as he didn't call. I'm about 10 minutes from the hub, so I'll pop into his office and have a word with him if he is in. Do you recall discussing Mr. DeFarn's request with Mark Anderson?
I probably discussed lots of Mr. DeFarn's emails with Mark Anderson. Yeah, I mean, without being disrespectful, Mr. DeFarn was very challenging sometimes, and even if he got an answer to an email would come back with a different question, and you could never actually get to answer his question. We would always want to, I mean, nobody wants to deal with complaints that go on forever and ever. You want to just deal with the complaint, leave them satisfied, and you're satisfied. No matter what you said, Eddie would not accept the answer. And the communications they had to come outside of the complaints process in the end, because they were copied into hundreds of people, all different requests, and all mixed up with other requests, and you could never get to literally what is the complaint. There was lots of consultation, and I have heard, following the inquiry, that, we wasn't consulted and we wasn't asked. I was there, and I can say people were consulted. People chose either not to come out or listen to Mr. DeFarn, or berated us in those blogs, and it was very difficult and very unpleasant at times.
You mentioned that you had many conversations with Mark Anderson.
Yes.
And I appreciate it's a difficult question to answer now, but can you recall your discussion about this issue, consultation with architects?
I can't. There was too many.
Can we look at what you said in relation to evening meetings in your first witness statement?
Yeah.
That's TMO quadruple 00891. Paragraph 52 on page 11. If we could pull that up, please, operator. You see the final sentence. At some of these meetings, write and produce samples of cladding materials, design options for the windows, and information on the proposed heating system. You see that?
Yes.
Do you recall being present when physical samples of cladding were shown to residents?
Yes, I do.
Can you?
I think it was only one. In all fairness, it was one, because I remember it being a champagne colour, and then there was an issue with the colour with the planners, but that's all I recall from that. But yes, there was samples, and the same with windows.
No, as you, this wouldn't have been picked up in the transcript, but as you answered that question, you gave us some shapes with your hands. Can you give us an idea, using perhaps something that would help us get an idea of the size of the samples?
From memory, I'm sure it was like a square about this big, and it was like a champagne colour.
I appreciate that you said that it was this big and used your hands. Could you give us a TV screen, something like that?
Maybe, I'm just thinking of a tile now, 600 metre square tile.
600.
Maybe not as big as that.
About a 600 millimetre
Yeah,
tile. Right.
tile. I think it was probably a bit smaller than that, because I remember seeing and I thought it was really nice. It was like I think it was a champagne colour, and then there was an issue with the colour with the planners, I believe, but I wasn't that involved in that part. As I say, I attended the meetings to be a familiar face. That was it.
You said champagne colour. Was it just one sample?
Yes, I think there was, yeah.
And was it, can you help us with was it just the cladding panel? Was it mounted on anything? Or was it just simply a panel that was about 600 millimetres square?
You know what, I'm not sure. I think it was like a panel. I don't think it was just a thin piece of material. So I think it must have been an actual piece of the cladding.
Mounted on a wall or plastered?
No, just on the floor.
On the floor. What can you recall what residents were told about the cladding at this meeting?
Not too much. I mean, it was so long ago, but I'm just trying to remember when we was there. It was like, this is the cladding, you can come and have a look, ask any questions. It was that kind of, it was just an open meeting for them to ask any questions. I'm not sure if they had something with other colours. I know there was an issue, they didn't want it to be exactly the same as the school. but that's probably all I can remember, if I'm honest.
When you say they, who do you mean?
Residents.
Residents didn't want it to be the same colour as the school.
Yeah.
Do you recall any discussion about whether actually the residents had any input on the decisions, whether it might be the planners who in fact would decide? Was there that kind of
I don't know ultimately, but I know there was lots of opportunity for residents to be involved, lots of questionnaires, how do you want to be involved, meetings, drop-in sessions, because obviously one size doesn't fit all. We would stay and have late evening meetings. We would do stuff in the middle of the day. We would do drop-ins in the morning. We would do one-to-ones going to people's flats and speaking to them individually, because I do remember some residents not wanting to come to the meetings because it was just a screaming match. I mean, nobody wanted to be there.
Can we move forward to early 2014? Now, you will recall, presumably, Claire Williams, who worked at TMO and was the project manager for the refurbishment.
Yep.
She came to give evidence to the inquiry in the autumn of last year, and she told us in her evidence when it came to finding residents to assist in scoring tenders for the project. If you could just pull up that evidence, day 54/1621. You see at the top of that page, Ms. Rumble, the A is her answer. She says, I think we'd been looking for a while, but I was still comparatively new, so I was find out who people were. So I think I'd asked housing management if they had anybody who they could identify, because it would take people's time, and I did ask. I think I'm aware that I'd asked 12 people for the 7 March interviews, and I think those people were referred by housing management to me as being people who possibly may be available. Housing management that Claire Williams refers to there, would that have been you?
Would have been us, yeah.
Do you recall being asked by Claire Williams for a list of residents who could assist with scoring tenders?
It's very familiar. I couldn't say 100%, but I think it does kind of ring a bell, because sometimes they would say, can you recommend any residents? You'd know the residents who wanted to get involved and the ones who didn't. So we might say, oh yes, X, number this one, they'll probably be willing to get involved. So I would say that's probably true.
So did you give her a list, a physical list, or just tell her?
I couldn't tell you. No doubt we might have sat there between us in the office just giving her names and addresses.
And the determination of those names and addresses would be down to you in the office.
Yeah, who we thought, because you'd want to get people involved, and quite often, it doesn't matter what organisation you work for, people don't tend to want to get involved. So it's quite difficult sometimes.
So you were thinking of people who would
get involved, yeah.
Was one of those people Mr. DeFarn? We know he's been involved up to that point. Was he considered?
I have no idea, but I'm sure that if we'd have asked him, because he wanted to be involved, he would have probably then said he's not come to the meeting. It's kind of how it worked. It was quite difficult.
Well, let me take a step back. Did you consider asking, did you discuss Mr. DeFarn as a potential person?
I couldn't tell you 100% whether we did or not.
Did you consider asking any members of the Leaseholder Association at Grenfell Tower, the GTLA? Or putting them forward? Sorry, I overspoke.
That's okay. I think, there's 4 people that make up the Grenfell Leaseholders Association, I believe. And I'm not sure one of those didn't live in the flat. Whether we asked the others, I'm sure we wouldn't have excluded them. But then I suppose you're just trying to just give names of who would get involved. And if Eddie was one of those who's going to get involved and be constructive, 100% we would have wanted him on board.
Right, so you wouldn't have excluded Mr. DeFarn or any of the members?
Absolutely not, no.
Going back to your first witness statement at paragraph 12. Thank you. You say, in that first sentence, during my time at the TMO, I would say that for the most part I had a good relationship with the residents of Lancaster West. Do you accept that that wasn't necessarily the case for every resident, or do you say that you had a good relationship with every resident?
No, you're never going to have a good relationship for every resident. Lancaster West was quite a close-knit community, and so was the staff in the office. And we had a good relationship with the majority of the residents. I would say I've probably picked 3 people on my hand, Mr. Defarn being one of them, who it was difficult. It was, in his defence, my colleague said that he was actually quite nice prior to the calc project starting. I didn't have that benefit. He was just, very rude sometimes, and it was difficult because we were there to help people. And if maybe he'd have dropped his guard a bit, we could have helped him a lot more. But he would never let you in. They were blogging about us, they were very rude, often inaccurate, and it was really hard. But the majority of people on the estate were lovely, and that's why we still done our job. We were happy working at Lancaster West because the majority of people were good, nice people.
Can I ask you about communications with we touched on them a moment ago, the Grenfell Tower Leaseholders Association? You don't mention that association or the GTLA in your witness statements. Were you aware of them?
Yes, I was aware of them.
Can you help us with why you don't mention them in the witness statements?
Because I think there was a lot of toing and froing of who could be an association, and I can't remember exactly now whether they were recognised as an association, because there was a residents' association, but they didn't want to be a part of it. And I know there was a lot of work done with Janet, who was the resident engagement manager. But I know it consisted of, I think it was 4 people: Eddie, Mr. Ahmed, Keith Mott, I believe, and one other, Tundi, who didn't actually live in the tower. He had a tenant in there. And they were literally the group that were doing these emails that were,
Well, sorry.
Sorry, the emails that you just couldn't answer and ever resolve an issue because they were pages long. They went to probably everybody in the borough, and you'll be being chased for a response, but they'd copied in so many hundreds of other people, and it's who's responding. And that's why often I'd go to Mark, or we'd speak to other people and say, who's going to respond to this? Because there was so much different issues in these emails. You couldn't just look at it and answer it. Had to go around and speak to everybody else.
Can we look at one of those letters or emails? Please look at TMO 00842290. Thank you. Now that's a letter from Tunde Awaderi of the GTLA addressed to Paul Dunkerton and also to you, dated the 12th of July 2012. And you see the reference in that is appointment of Studio E, architects for Grenfell Tower, improvement, not maintenance. Now, can we just skip down, please, operator, to the final paragraph on the first page? Yeah, thank you. It says, we do not expect you to appoint an architect without consulting us. Please find the forwarded emails copied to Siobhan Rumble and hand-delivered to her dated 7th March 2012 in relation to building a better relationship. We find it bewildering that you are not aware of these emails as project manager when the area manager of Lancaster West Estate, Ms. Siobhan Rumble, is very much aware of what is going on. Do you remember this letter?
Not specifically, but there were many communications like this.
Had you been ignoring emails sent to you by the GTLA about the project?
Not deliberately ignoring emails, no, but some emails would come in and they'd be so loaded and asking stuff that I wouldn't be involved in. So I would then either speak to Janice or speak to Mark or speak to Peter Madison once Mark left, and we would try and get a response together because they would come at you in all different angles, and some of this stuff was not in my... I mean, I didn't appoint architects or do any of that kind of work, but that's how they... Unfortunately, I know it sounds a bit rude, but that's how they operated. They just had us on the run constantly.
You mentioned some individuals there, so Mark Anderson,
Yes.
Peter Madison,
Yes.
and Janice
Ray.
Janice Ray.
Yeah.
Did you raise the concerns with Paul Dunkerton, who at the time...
I'm sure I did at the time. Paul was good. We worked well with Paul. But we'd always try, when you get an email, just try and answer. We'd want to answer the question, so then you can send it back, it's answered, and it goes away.
Can we look at an email sent by Keith Mott on the 25th of July 2012? It is at RBK 000-45656, and it's on the third page of the email chain. So the email from Mr. Mott, if we look, the first paragraph, I tried to call you, but no reply. I have hand-delivered the letters to you dated 23rd July 2012. First of all, it is always very difficult for us, the GTLA, to get the straightforward, simple answer from the KCTMO. Can you help us now with why the GTLA had not received a response from the TMO to their letter that we looked at a moment ago?
Well, that's dated, he said this 23rd, so 2 days before on the Monday. It may well have been in the system waiting for a response. It's only 2 days.
Would you have spoken to Mark Anderson or Paul Duncan?
Probably.
The letter. Now, the letter dated 12th of June.
12th of June, beg your pardon.
July.
I'm not aware of, we would deal with complaints and inquiries and whatever you want to call them. But I think some of these, and I've read some of the stuff that's in my statements, and it says like where Siobhan Rumble didn't give us a response. And I clearly did give a response, but it wasn't what you wanted, so they will come back again. So some of this stuff is like just repetitive. But we wouldn't deliberately ignore, we wouldn't deliberately ignore correspondence, not want to respond to correspondence, that I know.
Can we look at your response to this email? If we just scroll up, please, operator. So the second paragraph in particular, beginning, I do not think these emails are very helpful, and I would suggest we meet as a group in person to discuss any issues you may have. What was the issue with the emails themselves?
Because they would come from, I think it's Tundy, and then you'd respond to him, and then you'd get told, why are you responding to Tundy? It should have been to the GLA, or you respond to GLA, and it's Mr. Mott wrote you that. You should have responded to Mr. Mott. It was that kind of, I was there and I lived it, and that's my response says it all. As the letter was signed by yourself, I emailed you to acknowledge that I'd received it. And as I remember, the last time you hand-delivered a letter to me, I was scolded for responding to Mr. Mott, the general email, and not responding to you directly. So it was a case of you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
You mentioned a few moments ago in your evidence about an issue with a residents' association and whether GTLA were a residents' association. Do you recall Mr. DeFarn, who wasn't a member of GTLA, applying to form a residents' association?
I do, but it kind of went back and forth and involved lots of people. I know Janet was very good in trying to get things set up, and it involved RBKC, but I know it kind of went round in lots of circles, whether they could, whether they couldn't. Then I think they was asked to join the actual residents' association, and they didn't want to. So I think at a time they was being told it wouldn't be recognised, and then I think later on down the line it was. I can't remember.
Sorry. You said later on down the line it was. Is that your evidence?
I think it was. I think we agreed to respond to them as an organisation. I can't remember the detail, but there was a lot around that time in regards to that.
Were you involved in any of the decisions about that, or just in the correspondence about it?
No, probably just the correspondence, because Janet Edwards, her name was, she was the resident engagement manager and very good at trying to get people together and get residents associations up and running. So I know she would have done a lot of work, but I would have left that to Janet.
You produced as one of the exhibits to one of your witness statements a Grenfell Action Group blog. That exhibit is at TMO 100174666. Please, operator. if we could just zoom in at the top of that, we see that's titled Fire Safety Scandal at Lancaster West, and it's dated 28th of January 2013. You exhibit that to your statement. Did you read these blog posts regularly?
No, not really. But it'd be someone would say to me, oh, there's a blog and he's mentioned you again. So I would then go and look at it. And I think this one, where it shows there's correspondence where I did act on it. And I think the fire brigade did come down and they said there was no, it wasn't a fire hazard where they were parked. And I think it was Mr. O'Connor wasn't happy, and then he wasn't happy, wanted me to invite him to a meeting with the fire guy, which I didn't arrange that meeting anyway. But it was things like this. I mean, this parking, I mean, it wasn't ideal because as you go further up the road there, it goes under into the car park, and people should not have been parking there. There was not a lot we could do because it was private land, so it didn't come under the Kensington Chelsea parking people who removed the cars. So what we didn't have to, but where Eddie and Francis O'Connor was always writing this, I thought, you know what, let's just try and stop people parking there. And it wasn't just contractors, it was residents as well. So we had some stickers made. Do not park here, otherwise your car will be removed. And we couldn't really remove it, but we thought we'd try. And then we stuck all this sticky stuff on the back and literally plastered them over all the windows because I thought that might be a deterrent. Some people stopped parking there and other people didn't. So then obviously these blogs were always around. So I then there was a guy who had I'm not sure, like a mechanic under the arches. And so me and Rob went to speak to him and I said, how much would it cost to just tow the cars away? So he told us. So I remember going to the main Kensington Chelsea building, asking if I could have a budget just to kind of make a stand really. So we put the stickers on and said, if your car's not removed in 24 hours, it will be removed. So some people, I called this guy and he hooked up the car and he would take it off the estate and then leave it somewhere. And then it would get picked up and ticketed and taken to the pound. And then we had someone complain and go to the TMO. And then I got called in by Teresa Brown and asked what I was doing, what I thought I was doing and who gave me the right to do that. And I remember saying it's the only way to remove the cars. So I was told to stop doing it, so I did.
Can we look at an email exchange from February 2013? The reference is TMO 10026451. Please. Now, the exchange includes Stephen Cunningham of the LFB, Francis O'Connor and Councillor Blakeman. I'm going to ask you, you're copied into the exchange as well. Can I ask you to look at the email from Mr O'Connor to Councillor Blakeman, which is on the second to third page. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just check for a moment. On the second to third page, if we could scroll down to the next page, and at the bottom of that page, do you see, Ms Rumble, that the sentence that begins at the bottom of that page, we were intending to simply expose these fillings on our blog rather than waste our time and effort. Do you see that?
Yes.
If you just read that, as we had previously, and non-productive email exchanges with Ms Rumble and Ms Ray, who appear, as far as we can judge, not even to have read the current assessment. He's referring to the fire risk assessment carried out by Mr Stokes. So, is he correct? I think you told us earlier that you didn't recall them. You hadn't read them, is that correct?
No. But with regards to these cars, there was lots of correspondence, and I know the fire brigade did go and check. And we'd done everything we could, but he wasn't happy. And I think on the previous bit, it says he wasn't even happy with the guy from the fire brigade's response.
Having received this email, which makes a comment or criticism of you for not reading the fire risk assessment, did you then go and read the fire risk assessment?
No.
Councillor Blakeman responds to Mr O'Connor. She notes in her email, which is on the first page, if we can scroll back up to it. Yes, thank you. In the middle paragraph, the third sentence from the bottom, which is at the end of the line, begins, "What we are no longer prepared to address." Do you see that?
Yes.
Are complaints that are couched in tendentious, abusive, offensive or bullying terms. Neither will we tolerate visits to our surgery that are conducted in a similar fashion. I believe that Councillor Coleridge has given out much the same message. Did you feel that the Grenfell Action Group, the blog, had been abusive or bullying?
Yes.
Do you recall if you took any action in responding to Mr O'Connor's complaint following receipt of his emails, other than that which you've just told us about?
The blog, yes, there was one blog, and I think from memory it was there was rumbles of discontent and Ms Rumble and her cronies, and I just thought, I'm not going to tolerate that from Mr O'Connor. So I rang him and said, stop writing about me in your blog, otherwise I'm going to seek legal advice and get a legal letter sent to him to tell him to stop it, because he was rude and it was offensive and it was often inaccurate. And then there's something in my witness statement that he then comes back further to your threatening phone call. But underneath, I said it wasn't threatening. I merely just being robust and practical and just saying to him, stop it, because I won't tolerate that. And then I think he did quieten down a bit.
Can we look next at another complaint? The reference is IWS 0001597, and it's an email on the second to third page of that chain. If we could go on to the third page. And the second paragraph, if we could just zoom in on it. Just have a look at that, please. It says, the area manager, Siobhan Rumble, verbally told the secretary of the GTLA, Mr Miguel Alves, on 31st January 2014, that she and the council had got better things to do but read emails from the GTLA. And then it proves conclusively how arrogant Miss Rumble is to make such a comment on behalf of the councillors of RBKC. We strongly believe somebody has to take responsibility for this. She has lost our trust and respect as a neighbourhood manager of Lancaster West. She is not suitable and capable to be part of the team to handle the 9.7 million Grenfell Tower regeneration project. It's important you restore that trust immediately as a tenant-led organisation. Were you aware of the strength of feeling against you personally?
It was as I say, probably about 4 people, and I don't believe this statement to be true, because I would never have said, I know I can be outspoken, but I would never have been that rude. But this is what they would do letters and refer to you like that and say, this is the same way Francis O'Connor said, Siobhan Rumble threatened me. No, if I'm just telling you to stop doing something, that is not a threat. But it's the same. I don't believe I'd have said, we got better things to do. I don't talk like that. And I was more than capable of doing my job down there. And I did, and I enjoyed it the time I was there.
Did anyone talk to you about this email within the TMO, Robert Black or any other senior manager?
I don't think so. We was all used to seeing this kind of correspondence.
Mr Chairman, I've come to the end of my prepared questions.
Right, thank you very much. Well, Ms Rumble, as you hear, Mr Gadd thinks he's exhausted his questions, but we would have a bit of a break at this stage to enable him to take stock and also to enable others who are not here to suggest further questions we might want to put to you.
Sure.
So we'll have a break now. I'm going to say 20 to 1.
Yep.
Please, we'll come back at 20 to 1, unless we're told that further time's required. If we are, it might be a little longer.
Sure.
And then we'll see if there are any more questions for you at that stage.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And again, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, Mr. Gadd, well, we'll say 20 to 1. If you're told that more time is needed and if a good reason is given for it, then of course we'll consider it sympathetically.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Would you ask Ms Rumble to come back in, please? Now, Ms Rumble, I'm sorry we kept you waiting longer than
That's
I
okay.
indicated. Whether that means there are a lot of questions or not very many questions, I'm not sure. We'll find out. Yes, Mr Gad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms Rumble, you were giving us evidence this morning about Seamus Dunley and the removal of the self-closing device in the door. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Can I take you to the transcript, please? It's page 40, line 15. I asked you a question. Do you remember a conversation with Mr. Dunley where you discussed removing self-closing device? You said, yes, I actually don't. And when I saw this email, I thought, obviously, me and Janice must have had a conversation. And from Janice's email, please tell him to stop doing it. And so obviously I must have had a conversation with him, was told him. This is why I actually rang a colleague, because I was thinking I didn't remember this because we didn't really touch front doors. My question is, who was that colleague that you spoke to?
My colleague was Rob Regan.
And did you speak to Rob Regan at the time that Janice sent the email, or is this something?
No. Recently, this was because I was coming here, I was thinking I needed to know because I didn't realise about these doors. And so I rang and said, did you know Seamus took these off some doors? And he said, yeah. I said, why did he do it? And he said, because some of the people, some of the elderly people, the doors were too stiff. So I said, oh, right, okay. So I thought, at least I know now. So, but that's why I asked, because I wanted to know, because I didn't know why he'd taken them off.
At the time that Janice Ray sent the email, did you speak to any colleague about it? Do you recall? Can I ask you I'm just going to ask you some questions about the evidence you gave this morning about Janice Jones liaising with RBKC whenever
Yes.
someone would move in. And you also told us about questionnaires that were sent to residents. Would the information that was contained in the questionnaires, for example, on disabilities or vulnerabilities, would that be passed to Janice Jones? Or would she conduct the questionnaires?
No, sometimes we might get asked, there was a door knocking exercise and we would fill out sheets. I can't remember the detail of all of them, but it was obviously to do with the works, the regeneration works. So we might go round and door knock people, but I can't remember what was in the questionnaires, but I know there was lots of different occasions we done that. It wasn't just to collect disability stuff. I'm not aware that it was specifically for that. But as I say, with regards to anything like that, Janice, if there had been like a drop-in session or one of the Ryden RLOs had spoken to a tenant and found out that they had some issues or concerns, they would come back to Janice and us and just say, oh, such and such needs some assistance on this, that or the other. So then Janice would go, take all the details, and should they need assistance or support, Janice would then liaise with the support workers at RBKC and then try and put in place some support. And that was the same with hoarding. Hoarding was a big issue. So Janice was very involved with helping people, and obviously because of the works, that was a priority to get some of those places emptied, because obviously they couldn't get in to do the works. And Janice was really good at dealing with the people who were vulnerable like that and just saying, you know, put a few bits outside and we'll come and collect it. She'd done that a lot. So it's things like that.
You mentioned the role that Janice Jones would play in collection and collation of information such as that. Would David Noble have had any role in that? Would he have liaised, for example, with RBKC, housing or social services or occupational therapy, as far as you're aware?
Not as far as I'm aware, but it was only really in relation to our residents, and if they needed to move for whatever reason, or we had to engage them with some mental health support, then Janice would be the one leading on that, and that would be just us at Lancaster West.
Is it fair to say that there didn't appear to be any comprehensive system for the collection and collation of such information, vulnerable resident information for Grenfell Tower?
There may well have been in David's role, but as I say, that would never always come down to our level. for whatever they were doing at the TMO and collecting their data for other stuff. I do believe that that's what his role was all around, that kind of work.
If there was such a system, you weren't aware of it.
No.
Is that fair?
No, yes.
Now, if we can go to the transcript again, page 79, line 20. So the question was about leaseholders at Association at Grenfell Tower putting themselves forward for the tender exercise. And I think your response is did you say that there are 4 people? Yes, in your response, there's 4 people who make up the Grenfell Tower Leasehold Association. Can I ask you then to look at an email which is at TMO 00842290? Could we go to that, please, operator? That's TMO 00842290. And if we can scroll to the bottom of that email. You see a list of names there, 9 in total. That suggests, wouldn't it, that there were at least 9 members of the Leasehold Association?
Yeah, maybe there was. I think there was 12 leasehold properties, I believe. But the only people I was aware of in regards to the Grenfell Leasehold Association and all the correspondence was Tundi, Mr. Defan, Mr. Mott and Mr. Ahmed. They're the only ones that I recall dealing with.
Now, can I ask you to look at a couple of petitions that were submitted by the Grenfell Tower Leaseholder Association? The first one in 2013, and the URN for that, Mr. Operator, please, is RBK 0002270. If we can go to the last page in this document, we see there 94. The 94th entry is Mr. DeFarn. Now that's a petition submitted by the Leaseholder Association, isn't it?
I guess so.
Do you accept that 94 signatories of that petition is a significant number of the residents of Grenfell Tower?
It is, but I don't doubt that Eddie was out door knocking and saying, sign this document, because if that was the case, that many people were unhappy, we would have known about it.
This is a petition in relation to the power surges that occurred in 2000.
Yeah, and the power surges, from memory, it was like a handful of people to start with. I don't know whether other people, I don't know how many, because Janice and I think Dion as well at the time literally went out. There's a lot of correspondence back and forth, what I've sent that's in the pack. And we went to take a list of all the items, but it originally started off just a couple of people because the calls were coming in and we thought that's a bit odd. My laptop's blown up or my fridge has blown up. And then so we sent people out to go and have a look. And first we thought it was just a couple of properties. But then I can't remember how many were on the list. It certainly wasn't 94.
Well, this document suggests that 94 people signed a petition that was submitted by the GTLA. That would, at the very least, suggest, wouldn't it, that 94 people may have been concerned about power surges. The GTLA were representing the concerns of those 94 people. Is that fair?
I guess so, but it's how that, I'm sorry, but it's how that information came about, Yeah.
Can I ask you to look at the board meeting minutes of the TMO dated 21st November 2013, and the reference for that is TMO 10028444. And I think it's page 7 in that document. And the last under, you'll see there that these are minutes of the programme board meeting. Under Grenfell Tower, the last sentence of that paragraph is that it had been agreed Thank you. To hold no more public meetings because of the stand being made by the Grenfell Tower leaseholder group. Do you know what was being referred to there by the stand made by the Grenfell Tower leaseholder group?
I'm not sure, but I am guessing it's in relation to, we had a couple of evening meetings where Eddie and another guy, I think it was Willie, had came in, and one of Mr. Defan's favourite sayings was, "This is a slum, we're living in a slum, you're doing nothing." And we were there actually holding a consultation meeting, telling them how much money we were going to spend on the tower, wanting their involvement. But he was just screaming it was a slum. I remember Peter Madison was there. And I just said, if that's how you're going to behave, leave. You know, because it wasn't constructive and it made other people feel uncomfortable. I mean, they wasn't well turned out at the meetings anyway. And I think it's because people knew that it would just turn into a circus. And I think after that, and I'm not sure if that was the same meeting, because there's some reference to Councillor Blakeman being at a meeting, who witnessed this kind of behaviour. And we thought, you know, we give up our evenings to come and try and consult and help you. We don't come there to be abused and actually get nowhere. Do you know what I mean? There was nothing constructive about it. So I think that's why they probably decided, let's stop this and do it another way. And we asked people, how would you like to be consulted? And I think people preferred us to go to their house. But as I say, there was a room put together in Grenfell, so that was manned, I think, all day, and people could pop in and out and speak to Rydens. They could speak to us all the time because we was always in the office, just at the bottom. Sometimes we spent time in that room and just being there to answer any questions people had and just, support the project, really.
My final question, Ms. Rumble, is there anything else that you'd like to tell the panel that you think might help them in their investigations and deliberations from the time that you worked at TMO?
No, not really. I think, obviously, from the inquiry, I just hope, well, even without the summing up at the end of all of this inquiry, we're all going to learn something from it and just hope that, you know, nothing like this ever happens again.
Mr. Chairman, I've come to the end of my questions and those that have been submitted, and there are no more questions for Ms. Rumble.
Good. Well, thank you very much indeed. Well, Ms. Rumble, it's a little later than we'd hoped to break for lunch, but I think it's very important that we all thank you very much for coming here to give your evidence. We've all found it very useful and interesting to hear what you have to tell us. And so thank you very much indeed. And now that is all the questions, and you're free to go.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Right, Mr. Gale, well, we'll break at that point. We have another witness, do we, this afternoon?
We do, Ms. Bartholomew.
Good, thank you very much. Well, then I think we'll resume at 2:10. Please take her then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.